And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio. And I thank you for joining me on this glorious, glorious Friday night in Pittsburgh. And I hope it's glorious weather-wise, wherever you are in Steeler Nation, Pittsburgh or otherwise. And before I get started, I'd just like to ask you to please like and subscribe to our Behind Steel Curtain YouTube channel, where we bring you live shows each and every night and day, including this show. And we have the Steelers Hangover on Monday with Brian, Anthony Davis, and Shannon White. We have the Touchdown Under Show, which you saw a few hours earlier, if you watched it live. That's with Mehdi Pavarall and Mark Davison. We have the Steelers Preview every Thursday with Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, and Brian. We have Know Your Enemy with Jeffrey Benedict and Shannon White every Wednesday. We have the Scobro Show every Tuesday with Dave and his brother Rich. I think that's everything. Tate Boys. Kevin Tate has a show. I forget what day that's on. I think it's on the weekend. Of course, Brian has some shows on Saturday and Sunday. So please check it out. And you can check all those live shows out live on Facebook too. So if you're watching me on Facebook, hello. I hope to bring you a good show tonight. And you can catch all of those live shows after the fact on any audio platform of your choosing. In addition to that, we have an audio-only side to the podcasting platform. You can listen to those shows every day and on any audio platform of your choosing. There's Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, The Live Mic with Michael Beck, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey Benedict, What You's Talking About with Kyle Kreis. Chris Yu has a show. So you could the War Room. Matty Pepperell has his own show too. So we got you covered. Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts, they have a draft podcast each and every, and they're doing tremendous work. This is Andrew's time of the year, and Jeremy. I mean, they're just totally up on everything NFL draft, and with less than a week to go before the first round, this is their Super Bowl, I'm sure. So please check their work out. Andrew does a lot of great work, and so does Jeremy. They do it in written form and in podcasting form. So please check those guys out. And of course, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, anything Steelers related. We're going to have it for you. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And let's see who we have in the live chat. Who was number one on this Friday night? Daredevil. All right. Daredevil's always aiming for that number one spot, and he was the first one in. Mike C. from YouTube says, what's up? Devin Logan says the same thing, but he's from Facebook joining us. Brian Brown, Steelers Pittsburgh. Kathy Forrid. And she says, consolation of being sick, I get to watch the shows. I get to catch the shows. Well, I hope you feel better, Kathy. Harrison Schultz, who asks, right out of the gate, please tell me the Steelers are going OT or D-line with their number one and not QB or any other position. Well, I can't tell you that, Harrison. I wish I could. I can guess, but my guess is just as good and probably worse than a lot of people. But yeah, it's we're gonna know the answers to those questions in less than a week. So we'll transition from speculation to analyzing these picks. You know, as people always say, some people will be happy, it'll be sad. I posted a mock draft on Friday. Don't usually do that, but I figured I'd give it a try. I'm conducting a little exercise. And somebody said about my draft, I appreciate the hard work, but I would be despondent. They used the word despondent to describe their reaction to such a draft, to that hypothetical draft. So you can only imagine how people are going to feel when the real thing is finally here. But that's every year. So you could go in any number of directions with that number one pick, and you're gonna, as far as your opinion, and you're gonna have people like you, Harrison, that are like, yes, I wanted an O lineman all along, or I wanted a D lineman all along, and then somebody else would say, well, I wanted a quarterback. So, it's all speculation. But before I get more into the draft, I got to add some more people in here. Clarence Washington, Myron, Jane, and Bert. Just me, Jeff Comand. All right. Welcome, everybody. Before I get into all of that draft talk, I just want to get into Friday's news of the day, and that's it was announced that the Steelers, through various sources, including Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, that the Steelers have reached an agreement with Terrell Edmonds, a strong safety, on a 1-year deal. So he's back in the fold. He was out there on the free agent market for, 6 weeks now. I figured somebody would snatch him up, and I realize he's not the most popular and beloved Steeler player. He was a first round pick in 2018, 28th overall. There's no question that he was overdrafted, but I thought up to this point he's had a fairly solid Steelers career. His first 4 years, he seems to have gotten better each and every year. He's very durable, very consistent, and again, very solid. And he's just the kind of safety that you would normally pair with a dynamic player like a Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I'm glad to see him back. Again, I don't know why he didn't get more love on the open market. Usually the free agency period is where decent players, not great players, but decent players go to make good money. And for whatever reason, Edmonds didn't make that good money. I mean, relatively speaking, in the football world. And it's I guess a bit of a mystery as to why. Maybe Tyrann Mathieu really is setting the market. I know other safeties have signed, so that can't be the entire thing. But his deal, Edmonds' deal, is reportedly worth $2.5 million, which is just a shock. I mean, that's as somebody said, I think it was Mark Caboli, that's less than, on paper anyway, than what Marcus Allen is going to make in 2022. So I don't get it. He's not this bust of a player that people make him out to be. I mean, people take things to the extreme, and Terrell Edmonds is certainly not a bust. He's certainly not a liability in that secondary. You've seen how they've handled liabilities in the recent past. I mean, they benched Artie Burns by his third year. I think he was almost exclusively a special teams player by the time he left here. So, I mean, that's the guy that was drafted in 2016. Jarvis Jones had a hard time seeing the field. James Harrison was basically taking his place by the end there. So, they're not going to just leave a guy in there for 4 straight years if he is a total liability. So, he's not the horrible player that people make him out to be. And of course, he's not a superstar, but he's pretty good. And usually pretty good players like that, pretty good young players, get paid in free agency. And with the salary cap being expanded this year, it's just a mystery as why he wasn't snatched up by another team. But for selfish reasons, I'm glad the Steelers have him for 1 more year, because it helps solidify a defense that I think can be really good if all the right pieces are in place, and maybe even dominant like it was in 2019. I mean, there's that possibility. Obviously, all the people coming back, Watt, Highsmith, and then they added some new pieces, and Jack and Levi Wallace. And of course, you have Tuitt and Alu coming back, and Hayward had pretty much the best year of his career last year on the line, and he had no help to that degree anyway, to the degree of it Tuitt and Alu all year. So Devin Bush, if he improves and plays close to the player they thought he could be when they traded up to get him in 2019, if he makes that leap this year, I mean, this could be a really fantastic defense. So to have somebody like Edmonds in there, a steady guy who plays well in the box, and he is really good at covering tight ends, something that's been a problem for their defense for a number of years. So, I mean, that's one aspect that gets underappreciated when you're talking about Terrell Edmonds, So to have him back in the fold, I think it's a good sign for the 2022 defense, because I think it's going to have to, I don't want to say carry the team, but it's going to have to be the better unit of the two, I would think, for the Steelers to stay in the mix all year, So that's it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year with Edmonds. I mean, people are saying it's a prove it deal, but I mean, what does he have to prove? He's a solid player. He's a steady player. I mean, if anybody's expecting him to suddenly turn into Ronnie Lott, Troy Polamalu, or whatever in his fifth year, that's probably not going to happen. You want him to keep doing the things that he's been doing, only a little bit better. When he's paired with the Mick Fitzpatrick, that's pretty much all he needs to be. But I think overall, what this tells me, the fact that they probably could have gotten Edmonds signed to the fact that he settled for $2.5 million, it probably tells me that he was looking for a deal around, and this is just speculation. I have no way of knowing this. I'm certainly not an expert in this field, but if somebody like Fitzpatrick's going to command 15, 16, 17 million a year, which is probably what he's going to want and command, because that's what the top safeties in the NFL are getting. Edmonds, you would think, would get 8 to 10 million a year. A young guy, a solid starter, a consistent, healthy starter. So the fact that they wouldn't even give him that tells me that it's kind of like what we saw last year, a cornerback, and what we're going to keep seeing with outside linebacker. They're only going to be willing to give one player big money, and the other player they're probably going to try to get by on the cheap, through drafting and that player playing on his rookie deal until it's time for him to become a free agent. I think that's how they're going to handle this now with these various units on the team. So I don't know what Edmonds can do this year that would say to them, all right, we're gonna lock you up to a multi-year deal at fair value next year. So I don't know what it is Edmonds could do to convince them this year. So what that tells me is he's probably going to be gone next year, and they might draft a safety this year. Maybe not in the first round, but certainly maybe second, third, fourth round, and hope that player could develop into a starter, which, I mean, it's reasonable. I mean, when you're playing with somebody like Fitzpatrick, it's reasonable to expect that, especially when you consider that Edmonds was mocked in the second, third round the year that he was drafted in the first round by Pittsburgh. So theoretically, I mean, you could get a solid starter as the second, third, or fourth round pick. So that's what it tells me right now. I don't know. I mean, the fact that he only got 1 year for that kind of money, it's just puzzling to me. So that's pretty much all I had to say about Edmonds. Some other news that came across this week was the report on, I think it was Monday, maybe it was Tuesday, that Deontay Johnson wasn't going to be attending the first week of voluntary workouts, the OTAs. I guess that's what they are now. And of course, these are just rumors. Andrew Filipponi of The Fan basically just said, a source tells me blah, blah, blah on Twitter that Edmonds is not reporting for voluntary workouts and he's looking for a new deal. Of course, Johnson disputed that and said that's not the whole story, or that it isn't any part of the story, basically, in so many words. But my feeling on these OTAs, voluntary workouts, they haven't changed. The feelings haven't changed. They're voluntary. So I realize that these can be weaponized by either the media and / fans or the player when it comes to money. If a player just decides he's not going to come to one of these workouts for just personal reasons that have nothing to do with money, nobody even talks about it. Nobody even knows about it. But if it's been determined that the player's not participating in these meetings or these workouts because he wants to prove a point in terms of his contract, then it becomes a story, and it gets weaponized by everybody involved, and it becomes a big deal for some reason. And again, like I say every year, and I've been saying this for I think over a decade now. If these workouts are really that important for these players, for these teams, then you got to make it mandatory. You have to fight for that. Every time there's a new CBA being negotiated, if you're the owners or the GMs or the coach, whoever feels these are important, and we know the coaches feel these are important. They think everything's important. Then you have to fight for it and make them mandatory. Otherwise, you really can't criticize these players for not participating if they don't want to, for whatever reason, even if it's just to prove a point in terms of their contract. You can't hold it against them for not showing up. I mean, and people always say they like to compare their work lives to these players' work lives. Like, I hate to get into it, but like a few years ago when the anthem stuff was big, one of the popular refrains was, well, if I did that at my job, I'd be fired. Well, first of all, you're not going to be kneeling at your job. People would think you're crazy because you don't have the kind of platform that a professional athlete does. So it's kind of comparing apples and oranges. But yet, when there's a something that most people can relate to, and that's being forced to do something at your job that you're not required to do, you're not really getting paid to do, being kind of pressured into doing that, I think we could all relate to that. Because what if your boss had a baptism, like Seinfeld, when Elaine's boss kind of tried to pressure her into going to his, I guess it was his kid's bris, and she wanted to go to a baseball game, so she lied about, said she was something, I forget what the lie was, and then she was photographed at a baseball game, or she made she was kicked out of the baseball game, and she made news, and she was scared to death that her boss would find out. Meanwhile, she didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she didn't have to lie about not wanting to go to her boss's bris, So imagine if you were in that situation and you felt pressured into doing something that your boss wanted you to do off the clock. Wouldn't you be mad about that? So you would think this is something that more people could relate to, but they don't relate to that. It's, he should be there, the usual stuff. He's a diva. He's a piece of garbage. He's a piece of trash. He's a trash human being for not coming to these voluntary workouts. So it's every year, it's the same thing. And, honestly, and I this stuff just doesn't bother me. And I hate to sound like somebody who thinks he's above it all, because I'm not, but I mean, I've been following sports for so long. This is not new stuff. Contract disputes have been going on since as long as sports have been going on. I mean, this stuff's been happening, since before I was born, and I certainly have been following it since a little kid, and it's not unprecedented. Yet people act like it is every year, and they act like there's never going to be another contract dispute, and they really take it personal, and I don't know why. Because anytime you have a CBA and you have contracts and you have these deals, these other players signing new deals all the time, well, money's going to be a part of the storyline when it comes to sports. So why we take it so personal, I don't know, but we should, Johnson has done nothing in my eyes up to this point that would make people really hate him so much. And we don't even know if he's not showing up because of trying to prove a point. He might have had something else he had to do, and I saw like the list of people who were at these workouts. It's not like it was the whole team. I think it was maybe barely half the team. So, really, what's the big deal? Last year, TJ Watt didn't participate in training camp fully, even though he was under contract and even though it was mandatory, and everybody seemed to understand that because he was trying to avoid injury, So what's the difference between TJ Watt and Deontay Johnson? It's just, to me, it's a big old nothing burger. And I'm not going to worry about Deontay Johnson's participation until maybe training camp. If he doesn't show up for training camp, maybe that's an issue because he'll be showing up or he'll be holding out then. That'll be an official holdout. Not coming to these OTAs is not a holdout. That's just not a holdout. It's a voluntary exercise. So, but regarding Johnson, I think it's funny how really, I mean, he's been a steadily improving player since his first year here. And he's never really caught on with the fans as far as being a good player. I think a lot of it, honestly, is Antonio Brown kind of spoiled us when it comes to true greatness with a receiver. I mean, he was an all-time great. You can say what you want about him. He's a goof. There's no doubt. But then again, so was Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson. Frank Sinatra had his problems, but yet, their talents were undeniable. So, sometimes you have to separate the true greatness of a person's profession, what they can do professionally with their life calling, with their personalities. And Antonio Brown was just so awesome, clearly a first ballot Hall of Fame type player. So when you see somebody who's performing, who's a really good receiver, probably if there are like two tiers of number one receivers in the NFL, I'd say Deontay Johnson's in that second tier. He's a really good player, and he's had a really good start to his career. He has 254 catches, 2,764 yards, 20 touchdowns. I mean, and when you compare him to somebody like Deebo Samuel, and a lot of people have been doing that this week, Samuel has 167 catches, roughly 2,600 yards. And of course, you factor in the rushing element to his game. He has 550 rushing yards and 81 carries. So clearly, Samuel he's been more of a big play threat. If you look at his yards per catch, it's 16.3, and Deontay Johnson is a little under 11. So you could make a case for either player. So I don't think there's a huge separation there, but in the eyes of and I think this is more of the recency bias because Samuel had such a he played such a vital role in the 49ers deep playoff run, and he looked really cool lining up in the backfield and as playing that role from time to time. But really, they're comparable players, and the rumors with Johnson has been that he wants a contract. And again, he's never said this, but the rumor seems to be he wants a contract around 17, 18 million a year, which people find to be too much. But this is really what Antonio Brown and receivers of his ilk were getting 6-7 years ago. The top receivers were making this amount of money. Well, now those guys are making 25, 30 million a year. So it stands to reason the way these things are slotted that Johnson would be making around 18 million a year now on a new deal. And if you look at some of the players that are making 18 million a year, Kenny Golladay of the Giants, I think that's how you say his name, from the Giants. In 5 years, he has 220 receptions for just under 3,600 yards. Christian Kirk, that's the famous one that just signed a deal with the I think it was the Panthers, right? Or no, Jaguars. 236 catches for 2,900 yards in 4 years, and Johnson has put up comparable, if not better, numbers in 3 years. So, to say that he's not, that's preposterous that he makes that kind of money. I know he has the drop issue and everything, but people have pointed out that so is Samuel. He's had drop issues, especially last year. So, maybe the Steelers don't want to pay that. Okay, fine. You don't want to pay that kind of money, but the alternative is you're going to have to keep throwing draft picks. Like I said 2 weeks ago, you have to keep throwing draft picks at the receiver position and hoping that you hit. And to me, I think somebody like Johnson, when you have so much uncertainty at the quarterback position right now, I'd say you want whether it's a guy like Trubisky or a young guy, a rookie, or even Mason Rudolph. I think you'd want to surround them with reliable weapons, which Johnson, for the most part, has been. And Chase Claypool is still a work in progress, and he's heading into his third year. If you draft a really good young receiver and he pans out for you, well, then all of a sudden now you have a really good receiving core again, led by Johnson, who would kind of be a veteran, but at this point. If you're talking about having a Ben Roethlisberger in his prime or a receiver of that caliber, or I'm sorry, a quarterback of that caliber, then I could see you maybe going with younger receivers, because, like Brett Favre used to say, I just used to look for the same color jersey as me that was open, and that's who I would throw the ball to. When you have a quarterback who's that good, they're going to make any receiver look good for the most part. But when you have a younger quarterback or one who's still trying to prove himself, like a Trubisky, I think you'd want to have better weapons. So, I think eventually the Steelers are going to have to, like they did last year with TJ Watt and paying him $80 million, they're going to have to come to the realization that they're going to have to pay. They can't sit around and wait for a once-in-a-lifetime receiver like a Hines Ward or an Antonio Brown to come along before they are willing to give big money. They're going to have to get with the times and realize that even pretty good number one receivers are going to command more money than they're used to paying. So that's all I had to say about that. It's just an interesting thing with Johnson, because I think he's a good player. I really do. I think he has the chance to be a superstar. But things are changing, and now a lot of people are starting to talk about the receiver position being like their running back position, as you could find them anywhere. Well, if that's the case, then why haven't the Steelers been able to do that? Why weren't they able to develop some of these guys that they've drafted? Or more, I should say, more of these guys that they've drafted over the last 10, 12 years, like a James Washington, like a what the heck is his name? Forget his name. Marcus Wheaton, people like that. Even lower round picks like DeMarcus Ware, I forget, from 2016. Those guys. Sammy Coates, another example. Why isn't their batting average a little bit better? So those are my thoughts. And since this is my last show before the draft, I figured I'd have an extended question and answer. I mean, I've said all I could say about the draft. I mean, well, maybe not. I'm going to say more right now. I think, it wouldn't surprise me what they did. No matter what they did, quarterback, tackle, offensive tackle. Although I found out something pretty recently from listening to talk radio. They've only drafted 2 tackles in the first round over the last 30 plus years, which I thought was pretty interesting. So whether it's a tackle, receiver, which I think is a real possibility in the first round, quarterback, of course, is in play until it's not. Defensive line's in play. Even inside linebacker, I think, might be in play, because you just don't know about Devin Bush or even Miles Jack, who struggled a lot last year. So those are my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear yours. So let's see what you guys have. And Kathy Ford asks, very first question for tonight, will you be on next Friday? I don't think so. I think the way they've been doing it the last couple of years is it'll be people like Brian and Jeff, Dave, talking about the second and third round, maybe talking about the previous night's first round. That's how they've been doing it the last couple of years. I don't anticipate being on, but I'll surely be on the following Monday with Brian and Shannon, so you can catch me there. And I'll be on this Monday, of course, with Brian and Shannon. And remember, we have our live chat mock draft this Monday. So if you haven't gotten your if the list isn't full, you can still get your email Brian and he'll put you on the list as far as picking in the first round of the draft, the 32 team draft. Dark Storm says, I'm curious to see how Washington will do in Dallas. I mean, I think they have a better situation offensively. I think Dak Prescott's a heck of a quarterback. He might not get the respect nationally or that maybe he should, but he's a really good quarterback. Ryan O'Toole says, we vote that you're on next Friday, no matter what. Well, my ego appreciates that, Ryan. Thank you. I'll talk to the higher ups. Anthony Baker asks, do you think the Steelers would take Kenny Pickett at 20? I think if he's there, they're going to take him. If either he or Malik Willis are there, they're going to take that person, whoever it is. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't anticipate either one being there, honestly. But if one of those guys is there, believe me, well, I shouldn't say believe me, but I have a strong feeling that they're going to take whoever that quarterback happens to be. All the signs point to it. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. I think one of those quarterbacks is going to be gone at least by the time the Panthers pick at number 6. And then you have a bunch of the Saints have 2 number 1 picks. They certainly could use a young quarterback, and they have 2 picks ahead of Pittsburgh. So that's when you're talking about teams with 2 picks and they also need a quarterback, well, then that makes it a little easier for them to take a chance on a quarterback and see if they can develop one. So I think the odds are slim that either one of those guys is going to be there. But if by chance they are, then they're going to take him. Now, I also wouldn't be shocked, and they opened the door for this a few years ago. I wouldn't be shocked if they traded up. There's this part of me that has a feeling that they're going to do that. They're going to trade up, and they're going to take Willis if they do. That's who they're going to pick if they trade up. So, and this is Scott Michael Bowers. How funny would it be if history repeats itself and both Willis and Pickett are the first 2 quarterbacks off the board, and the third guy, Ritter or Corral, becomes ours and develops into something respectable? Well, that's what happened in 2004. Very good, Scott. Obviously, Eli Manning was the toast of that draft. He was the talk of that draft. The Chargers had the number 1 pick, but he was not going to play for the Chargers. They selected him. They traded him to the Giants, and the Giants selected Phillip Rivers, number 4 overall, and they traded him to San Diego. And Ben Roethlisberger thought he would go by the 4th pick. The Giants, if you watch the Caught in the Draft special about the 2004 draft, the Giants, according to Ernie Corsi, the GM at the time, they were going to pick Ben Roethlisberger, number 4. But the Chargers picked Eli Manning, number 1, even though he was pretty emphatic that he was not going to play for them, and that changed everything because I guess the Chargers wanted Rivers. I think that's how it was, and so the Giants drafted him, and then they made a huge trade to swap quarterbacks, and then that allowed Roethlisberger to fall to number 11, even though the Browns certainly could have used a quarterback at that point, and they passed him up. And you never know. I mean, it's funny because people talk about some of these great draft classes of the past. Like they talk about the '83 class, Marino, Elway, Kelly. How can you not? I mean, those guys are legendary. But Todd Blackledge was picked in the top 10 in that draft. He didn't really have much of a career. He played a while, but he wasn't a star. Tony Eason he was picked in the first round. He was good for a little bit, but not very long. Ken O'Brien was really good, but he was not the same level as Elway, Marino, and of course Kelly. And I think is that it for that class for that first round. But anyway, my point is, those guys, it's not that was a great class, but it wasn't 100% success. It was a little over 50% good, which actually for the draft is pretty good anyway. But the point is, one or two of these quarterbacks in this class is probably going to be good, probably going to have a really good career. So you can't just write off the entire class before the draft even gets here, because there are no guarantees that they're all going to be bad, and there are no guarantees about next year's crop of quarterbacks. Scott Michael Bowers, but by the way, I agree with you, Tony. If Willis slips out of the top 10, I do think the Steelers are going to do everything they can to get him. It's just a gut feeling. I think if they if he starts slipping in the draft, if one of those two guys starts slipping closer to them at 20, they're gonna because there are a couple of teams in front of them that have multiple first round picks, and if they can swing a deal to move up to one of those spots, they might just do it, because again, the point is to find your guy as quickly as possible, not to wait around and for some hypothetical better draft class of quarterbacks. But then again, like the disclaimer with that is, they have to feel strongly about somebody. They have to truly believe that this guy is good. You're not drafting a quarterback just to do it. That wouldn't be smart. That's how they got Artie Burns. Ryan O'Toole asks thoughts on Tuitt playing or not this season. I think he's going to play. I mean, I think all the signs now point to him playing. You're not going to know for sure until training camp rolls around and he shows up. But the arrow seems to be pointing towards him playing as of right now. I think that's kind of where they are as an organization. They feel like he's going to play. So I'm pretty confident he's going to play. I think if they felt that he may not play again this year, or he was leaning towards not playing, I think they would have made a move by now to part ways, honestly. This close to the draft, and you still have basically you only have 3 months before training camp. So I think if they felt like he wasn't on board this year, they would have made a move. And then here's another one from Dark Storm. I feel like Matt Corral might be the best of the bunch after Willis. I mean, that's the thing. You just don't know. It wasn't long ago that Corral was considered the top quarterback. I mean, it was long ago in draft coverage world. It was like January, but Corral was considered maybe the best of the bunch back in January or so. And then Malik Willis came along and blew everybody away. And of course, Pickett had such a great senior season and acquitted himself fairly well in his offseason at the Senior Bowl and the Combine and the Pro Day. So Corral has slipped, but again, these things change constantly. And this is from Dark Storm. If Watson is a top 5 quarterback, the Browns will be very good. Yeah, I mean, that's such a huge factor. If not, they crumble in a few seasons due to his contract. Even if he is really good, they might have some problems in a few seasons because of that contract. And I think when you see attitudes start to shift when it comes to some of these positions and what teams are willing to spend, like you're hearing, wide receiver now is becoming in some circles, it's being looked at as the way they started looking at running backs a few years ago. I think a part of it is, well, we got to pay these quarterbacks so much money. So yeah, you can go out and find a receiver at in any round and develop him into something really good, especially if you have a really good quarterback throwing him the ball. I think that's going to be the attitudes of a lot of teams because the quarterback's going to take up so much of the cap space. A really good quarterback, a franchise level quarterback. Now, what you're seeing with Devontae Adams in Oakland, Las Vegas, and of course Tyreek Hill in Miami, they went to teams that maybe need receivers to elevate their quarterbacks. Obviously, Tua in Miami, and of course, Derek Carr is really good, but a weapon like Adams could, really turn his career, or not turn it around, but really elevate his career as a quarterback. So, maybe you're going to see that in the future. Because just because you start to devalue a receiver, the position, it's not like running back. A receiver, really good receivers are still playing into their 30s. Now, a lot of running backs, they start wearing out by their mid to late 20s. So what you're going to have in the future, if you start devaluing receivers and saying we can find them in the draft, well, you're going to have a lot of disgruntled receivers out there who are still really good and really productive. So what's going to start happening is that they're going to be traded and they're still going to get mega deals, but they're going to be traded to teams maybe with quarterbacks who are not making franchise quarterback money. That's just my guess, because that's what we've seen with Adams and Tyreek Hill so far. So, when you're the Packers and you have to pay Aaron Rodgers, but you have to pay him, there's not a whole lot of room to pay what Devontae Adams wanted. And of course, we all know what Patrick Mahomes is making. So Tyreek Hill's making what, $30 million a year now, or whatever it is. So close to it. It's kind of hard to have those two salaries on your team at the same time. So you might see a lot, because I think receivers are still going to want to get paid. Just because you say they're a dime a dozen doesn't mean there's still not going to be a lot of really good receivers out there who are head and shoulders above these draft picks that you just brought onto your team. So, and this is from George Ott. Beating the Steelers in the playoffs will be the Browns' highlight of the century. Well, so far, that's been the highlight. That's been their highlight since they came back into the league in 1999. But they made a huge commitment to Deshaun Watson to make sure that wasn't their only highlight of the century. So, the window on them winning is officially open. The question is, how long will it remain open? Because that's a monster of a contract, and they have a lot of good players on that team that are going to want to, they're already paying Myles Garrett. So, how long before his salary can coexist with Deshaun Watson's salary? That's the thing about these mega franchise quarterback deals. And this is Steelers. Pittsburgh says Sonia wants the Steelers to get Baker Mayfield. You know what? That's kind of, not to sound crazy, but that's not that crazy of an idea. Like if Mitch Trubisky wasn't around and Baker Mayfield was cut tomorrow, I'd snatch him up. I'm sorry, I would. He's shown that he could be a pretty good quarterback in the past. His biggest problem last year was injury. Now, there are concerns about his attitude, and maybe he's not the best locker room guy. I don't know. Certainly, OBJ's had a checkered past as far as his character, locker room character. But for some reason, Baker Mayfield made OBJ look like the good guy last year. So maybe there's something about Baker Mayfield that is it screams diva and somebody who maybe isn't as good in the locker room as you need a quarterback to be. So, all right, folks, that's it for me. I'm gonna call it a night. Had a good time talking with you guys. I have to eat some late dinner and go to bed. I'm tired. So I thank you for joining me and talking about the draft and a bunch of other stuff. In just 6 days, you're going to know the answer to this 4-month-long question. What do you think the Steelers are going to do in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft? And I certainly, if I don't talk to you on Monday, I certainly hope you have a great time watching the draft. And remember, no matter if you're really, really happy or really, really angry or in the middle, it is a crapshoot. So even if you really hate the pick, he could be a superstar. If you're jumping for joy, he could be a bust. Just remember, think of it that way, and maybe it'll be more enjoyable. Or maybe I just made it worse for you. I don't know. But anyway, you guys have a great weekend. And as always, go Steelers. Take care, everybody.